Currently, here in the southeast United States, we are in for a rare stretch of sub-freezing temperatures. And since houses here in this part of the country are not built with nearly as much insulation, this means the possibility of pipes freezing, which can cause them to burst, and serious resulting water damage. The absolute best way to avoid freezing pipes is shutting off the water at the main and then draining the water lines completely if possible. However, more often than not, this isn't really a practical solution, since if you're living in the house, you're probably going to need running water. However, in the case that you can last without running water for the duration of time, or if you're trying to winterize a house that will be vacant during the cold weather, this is your best option. Moving on, tip number 2 is insulating any outdoor spigots or pipes that are in unheated areas such as attics or garages. If you have any outdoor spigots, first disconnect and drain any attached hoses, and then what you want to do is insulate the exposed spigot by wrapping it in some form of insulative material in order to prevent the cold outside air from conductively cooling the attached piping. Here I'm using some foam pipe insulation, which can be found at your local Team Orange or Team Blue hardware store. As for me in this case, I went Team Red because when I get the chance to vote with my dollar, I'm always trying to support my helpful hardware folks. However, if you aren't able to get your hands on the pre-cut foam pipe insulation, you can also make do with those dollar store foam pool noodles and just cut a slit in it lengthwise, as it's pretty much the same thing, and then you can wrap it around the pipes. In the case that neither of these are available to you, you can use other common household items like towels, socks, or blankets to wrap around the spigot and form an insulative barrier. Other good materials with insulative properties include bubble wrap and memory foam if you happen to have those on hand. In my case here, just to be safe rather than sorry, I went for a hybrid approach. First cutting a piece of the pipe insulation to length and then securing it with a bit of duct tape before covering it with a sock and then wrapping it around. In the case that you are using a towel or sock or anything that can absorb water, the final step is adding a waterproof barrier, since if it gets wet, it will lose all of its insulative properties and actually make things worse for you. So here I'm covering everything with a plastic grocery bag. Shout out to my local Food Lion bagger for hooking me up here. And then securing everything in place with a couple of wraps of duct tape. As mentioned before, I live in the southeast United States where temperatures rarely get into the low 20s, so this should be plenty for overnight below freezing temperatures, but depending on your location and climate, more layers of insulation may be necessary. Moving on to tip number 3, and this is to leave an internal faucet or tap slightly dripping throughout the duration of the below freezing temperatures. Technically, this doesn't prevent the water from freezing per se, but in the case that water in the pipes begins to freeze, it allows the pressure to escape the system rather than building up and eventually causing the pipes to burst from the expansion of ice. Ideally, this would be a faucet furthest from the water main source so that it has to travel through as much of the system as possible. And as shown here, it only really needs to be a slight drip. There's no need whatsoever to go full blast like you're trying to fill up the local town pool. And yes, leaving the tap dripping for an extended period of time will definitely slightly increase your water bill, but it's extremely cheap insurance compared to the thousands of dollars of possible water damage in the case of a burst pipe. Moving on to tip number 4, and it is to keep the cabinets open underneath your sink. Doing so allows the warm air inside your house to circulate underneath and then conductively transfer the heat to the exposed pipes. And finally, moving on to the related tip number 5 is to leave the heat on in the house. You want to make sure to maintain an internal house temperature of at least 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Obviously, warmer is better. I will say this is more of a tip for if you're leaving a house vacant, because if you're keeping your house at 55 degrees and living in it, you are an absolute psychopath. But regardless, as long as you meet this minimum temperature, you should be good. Anyways, that's pretty much it. Hopefully this was helpful. Let me know if you have any other tips about preventing pipes from freezing down below. Thanks for tuning on in, and we'll catch you next time. Adios, amigos.